I'll go back and I'll repeat a little bit of that just real quick to catch up.
No, that's fine. You know, it's so great that you're able to share this and you know, tell more about the purpose and what else you're working on right now specifically.
So, so my son and I were conceptualizing an audio book because we wanted to figure out like how do we reach veterans who won't ask for help, that they want help, they don't know how to do it because if they go to help, if they seek help, they're going to get something in their medical records. It's going to possibly cause them to lose security clearances, or some documentation might prevent them from a career opportunity or a promotion. And they didn't want to talk to non-veteran counselors, and we're just not trained to ask for help, and it's not okay. So there's just, even though the military's done a lot of good things to basically get ahead of suicide, get ahead of PTSD, there's still, it's a warrior mindset. You know that better than anybody. It is just not okay to ask for help if you got a boo-boo, you know?
Yeah.
So we created this idea. And then after my son passed away, he came back after 2 tours in Afghanistan with the 10th Mountain Division, and he just needed his adrenaline fix so he can go home and sleep, you know. And so it just got wiped out on his Harley one night, you know, and unexpectedly. And so I continued on with this idea, and I wrote and then narrated an audiobook, but it's different than just an audiobook. I actually did it with another veteran. I wrote it as a dual narration where another veteran is playing the voice of the critical mind that's constantly hijacking us, right? That doesn't give us any sleep. And it really robs us and steals precious moments from our lives because we're triggered and we're somewhere else instead of being with our kids or with our families, right? And so I went to a couple of acting schools in Vegas. I actually called and left a message for the owners and just saying, hey, I'm looking for a post 9/11 vet. I'm auditioning for an audiobook, and I'm looking for post 9/11 vet, you know, combat vet who would be interested. And so about a half an hour later, I get a call from this hardcore New York dude. His name is Yonel Dorellis, you know, and he's just like, yeah, this is Yonel Dorellis. And I'm looking, and I'm like, that's the voice. That's the guy, right? You know, because when I was in the military, I always hung out with the toughest guys, and they always seemed to be from Boston, Long Island, New York. I mean, they were just the craziest, and they were the most fun, right? And so Yonel had a perfect voice for it, and he himself was going through this massive transition. You know, he was a combat rescue helicopter pilot in like 4 of the 5 branches, and he was really just compartmentalized and isolating. He was in his cave, and so this is the perfect project. He didn't know it at the time, but so Yonel plays the voice of the critical mind. I play the voice of the rational, reasonable mind, and it's an hour and 20-minute long audiobook that's designed to go into the ridiculousness of that part of ourselves that took over in the shit when we needed it to. And it just started running the show, probably no different than when you get in the ring, something takes over. Well, but nevertheless, it works for us. We don't work for it. We don't work for our critical mind. Our critical mind works for us. And so it's designed to lay out the ridiculousness of like going to restaurants with your wife, and you're trying to act like you're there, but you're not really there. You're too busy assessing danger and you're having a panic attack because there's too many people.
I got yelled at that often by my ex for that.
Yeah. So really, Pat, that's what I wanted to do is find a way to reach veterans in the privacy of their own mind to where nobody knows they're getting help. But for me, personal development was the path when I got out of the Marine Corps, because I had a rage problem and I was not going to go to get help. And so I found personal development. Listening to audiobooks was my thing because I have a reading challenge, so I just started consuming personal development, and I started learning about my vocabulary. I had a very limited range of emotions I would allow myself to experience. I had a very limited vocabulary that I understood, and you know, I found out that I'm not an alcoholic or an addict at all, but I have I have an alcohol abuse problem. When I was younger, I would just get in all kinds of trouble with it. So I had to start looking at how I wanted to live my life. And so that's really, the audiobook, and I give it away to veterans. I don't make any money on it. It's really a legacy project for my son. And when I find legitimate veteran nonprofit organizations that I really think are doing good things, and I'll donate it to them and talk to them more about it. But it's a big part of my journey, is just getting this work developed and published.
Well, I mean, I should probably listen to your book. Number one, to educate myself and start, because it's a never-ending process of trying to heal yourself from the things we've experienced in life in general, and staying on top of that stuff. Because if you let it slide, what I've learned is that, just toughing things out and things like that, it eventually comes back to haunt you. That's where I acquired later on in life, during a really toxic marriage, where I just medicated myself with booze and would just sit down in the basement and, dealing with the, unfortunately, the level of narcissism and stuff. And the poor girl I was married to, she was married to a very intense human being who was constantly intense, right? And she didn't know how to deal with it. It's unfortunate. So, but that was just people. The way I look at things, I'm a very matter of fact guy. I've constantly researched. I don't know why, but I started asking questions about why kids had autism in the 90s that I was teaching, and started researching chemicals, vaccines, and I'm always looking for the why, right? And so it's a never-ending thing in my mind that I'm constantly. So when I talk to people, they look at me like I'm crazy and go, "What are you talking about?" And I go, "You don't see what the chemicals are doing to hormonal balances of children. You don't see the psychological warfare that's being waged on our children." I was abused heavily as a kid, so I'm super protective of my daughters. And so, I mean, it's a nuclear level where, like, the entire city knows that it'll all burn down if anything happens to the children. But so it's just a little too intense at times, right? And so that's kind of just the way I am. So I need to be constant, taking my foot off the gas pedal, things like that. I go to the school board meeting they're pushing transgenderism and all that sort of stuff. From their position, it's inclusivity, it's love, it's accepting everyone, and I'm going, no, I love these kids enough to talk about the truth and tell you that you're complicit in crimes against children. And I've got a serious issue with it, and we're gonna rectify this one way or another, no matter what it comes to. I'm just that kind of guy, with children especially. So it's like everybody in this city goes, just be careful around this dude, because he will go off on you. So I understand the intensity level and all that sort of stuff.
But it's also, I think, like you said, it's something you want to read, but I think it's something a matter of my goal, and I know everybody should really try to get this stuff in front of as many people as possible that need it. If you think about it.
Yeah, that's why, it'll help me, I'm sure, but it'll help me explain it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think you're onto it, Pat. Whether you are a veteran or not, you're certainly a warrior, and when you tell me that you have had an adverse childhood upbringing, a challenging childhood, that's exactly where I come from. It has an impact on you. Have you ever done the ACEs scale?
No.
Adverse childhood experiences, called the ACE, and it's available for free online. And there's 10 questions that it asks you about regarding abuse as a child. And basically, if you have a 4 out of 10, automatically you become predisposed to drug addiction, alcoholism, substance abuse, and diabetes and hypertension and depression. And if you get above a 6, those risk factors they exponentially multiply. And so on a scale of 10 questions, I scored a 10. Right.
Wow.
And so it would be cool to have you look at the ACEs scale. I'll send you a link. And because doing some research into unresolved trauma is really what I focus my energy on. Like, how do I dig into my shadows? Like when I shined a conscious light into my being, it was dark. There was no light. And then the more work that I did to resolve my trauma, the easier my life became. And, I'm 61 now. And I found joy for the first time ever when I was 53 by doing a lot of transformational work. And I feel like the second book that I wrote, that's just coming out next week, actually, called Be the Dawn in the Darkness, the relentless pursuit of becoming who we are meant to be. It's about coughing up the hairballs of trauma. And it was a very therapeutic process. But what I'm really here to tell you is the more we process unresolved trauma, the easier our life gets. If you get above a 6 in the ACEs scale, statistically, your life will be cut short 20 years. That got my attention. So I started looking at whatever I can do to resolve and expand and to move that energy out of myself, because trauma is stored like a hologram, physiologically, somatically, psychologically. There's just all these things that are locked up in us. And so moving that energy has been extremely rewarding for me.
Yeah.
So I'd like to talk to you on the other side of taking your ACE scale and see where it goes from there.
I can only imagine. Now, that's the thing for me is I was never sexually abused, but physically, psychologically, a lot of that. And the thing is my father, who was a veteran as well, when I was a little kid, I remember being at the Catholic Church every Sunday. Then all of a sudden we stopped going, and I was 9 and 10 years younger than my 2 oldest brothers. There were 5 siblings total. I was the youngest by quite a bit. And come to find out later on is my 2 oldest brothers were sexually abused by Catholic priests. And so my father and mother they had nowhere to turn back then. It was quite a few years ago. So the nightmare that they were living, that converted into them becoming alcoholics and my father becoming very abusive and things like that. And it just, it spread throughout the entire family. And my 2 oldest brothers were, to me, they were my heroes. I mean, one became they were exceptionally intelligent and talented. My oldest brother, and all my brothers, I'm 5'10". All my brothers are 6'5". They were all 6'5", big guys and stuff. But my brother Bill and Tom were both really good athletes, very intelligent. Bill became a multimillionaire by the time he was 23 or 24. My brother Tim was an Air Force pilot and then the vice president of the corporation. It was only a matter of a couple of years apart where they both committed suicide. So, when I was younger, I could tell that evil was roaming the planet in a lot of ways, you know what I mean? And as I got older and became more aware of it and stuff like that. So I'm the kind of guy that I'd like to walk through, there's a lot of people that I'd like to have with a sword, trust me, in this world. So that's where my darkness lies.
Well, what Mike and I kind of bonded over a while back was how many amazing athletes and fighters became world champions because of their adverse childhood experiences.
Sure. Yeah.
You can just go down a list of great fighters who have terrible stories about their upbringing, and the same with mine. I mean, if you talk to anybody that when I was in my teenage years and early 20s, like they would have never suspected I would ever be successful at anything. But it's amazing. So we're really looking at the concept of anti-bullying, from a different perspective than just helping people unpack being bullied. Is how do you help the people who are doing the bullying, and on the other side of the coin, how can you have solid role models like yourself and others, being able to help people find a different path than to play that role, because that's an identity that probably hard to shake if you're a bully.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. No, that's the thing. Yeah, so and I'm sure I told Mike that subconsciously, I didn't realize it at the time, but I was becoming a world champion because I was protecting myself from ever being physically abused again, right? So that's the thing. But I didn't unravel the psychological part of it. So when I was with a manipulative partner who was very good at gaslighting and doing all those things, and then that was the last 10 years of my marriage. And then when it's all done, said and done, and you sit back and you go, how did I not see all this happening? And that's when you start hating yourself and start beating yourself up even more just for not recognizing it.
And that's what it is. I think people sometimes need help and guidance to see those things, to recognize. That's why when you read materials, when you listen to people, you start to poke around your own mind. You start asking yourself questions, right? You start thinking, am I reading about myself in some ways? Is there something in this material that I recognize? And then, wow. And then you ask yourself those questions. Like you said, you can explore. But then it's so amazing that, as you mentioned about your father, Pat, and you mentioned a lot of veterans, sometimes they listen, they're not bad people, but sometimes the way they react to their own trauma makes them act in a bad way, in a negative way perceived by others. And that could be, I think the biggest accomplishment could be to be able to correct that, to be able to change that and give them a way to say, hey, that's not the only way out. You know what I mean? There's better ways to deal with that trauma.
Yeah. And that's the thing, so I spent a lot of time, besides sports, I spent a lot of time as a child in the woods. I'd go fishing by myself. I'd go camp in the woods by myself, stuff like that. What I did, and so I did that as an adult as well. I'd go on fishing trips and stuff like that. Then I got married, and then all of that stopped. She just wouldn't let me do things, right? So that's where I started short circuiting a lot. The things that I needed for my internal peace and stuff like that all stopped. So it was that was a bad thing, and that's things that I realized. And so one of the groups that I work with, downrange excursions, will take veterans groups on long kayaking trips, camping and kayaking down rivers and fishing. And so I got involved with helping them and their supplement company, which helps pay for a lot of that. And that's some good stuff. That's really, really needed, I think, for guys to get out there and reconnecting with nature and stuff.
Well, it's breaking the chain, of this generational trauma. Your dad, my dad, just that's how they did it, because my dad was abused by his father.
Yeah.
And I made an agreement with my great aunt when I was a young boy. She made me promise that she said, you'll be an adult a lot longer than you'll be a kid. And she made me swear to her that I would never, when I grew up and I had a family, I would never hit my children. I would never treat them harshly. And I would never raise a hand to them, especially in anger.
Yeah.
And when my son was 8 years old, it was time, and I had that conversation with him, and he agreed. He promised me, and we never broke it until the day he died. We never hit each other, not once. And whenever you hit your child, so there's something permanently fractured that's not coming back. And so I feel like we're not just victims of our genealogy. Like, we can break the chains of a generational violent, parent.
Yeah.
And that was probably the most important thing that I've ever done as a man, as a parent, is, and his children didn't see that side of him.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Yeah. I recognized that several years ago, that I guess that was one of the main reasons I'm here, was to definitely break that chain. So.
Yeah.
No, totally. That's why I think about what she did in your case, John. And she like you said, broke that chain. Sometimes you need to hear that. Sometimes you may not even be thinking that that's initially, and then it stays with you for the rest of your life. And you tell, like I said, you tell not only your son, but you tell others that are going to read about it in your concepts and in your work. That's it. You break so many other generational chains, and I think that's magnificent.
I think it's my observation is it only takes one healthy adult of good character to shape the mind of a child for life.
Yep.
And I'm one of the main characters in my work is my great aunt Glad, as I said, and she told me I was going to do extraordinary things with my life, and I believed her because she said it. And going through all the terrible things in my life, she said that God is love, and that you're going to find that out for yourself someday, and you're going to find your life's purpose. And
very wise woman.
Yeah, long story short, I said, if God is love, why is this happening to me? Why is my father so abusive to me? What's wrong with me? I said, I believe it's true for you, Glad, but it's not true for me. And so we kept this conversation going for 40 years until she passed away. And I did find out that God is love for me in my own way. And I did find my purpose, and I did do extraordinary things with my life, but I can't tell you how many traumatizing moments, violent, really bad moments I had growing up and as an adult, where I can remember just before the impact of something really bad, I would be asking myself, if God is love, why is this happening to me? And I just could not, I just kept reverberating, and then I would deal with what was going on, and I would move on with my life, and I would pick up the pieces, and I would, my fortitude just keep moving. And then after like 50 years, I finally figured out that there was a purpose for my suffering. And that purpose for me was I developed a sense of empathy to be able to understand the pain of others. And I could stay calm in somebody else's storm. And I could not get rattled. And I could just show up and sometimes just shut up and be quiet is all people needed. And so that was really a big eye opener for me, is that there has been a purpose for my suffering.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Makes perfect sense. Absolutely. That's amazing. And I think a lot of people will also realize the same. And it takes that type of sharing and explanation. I mean? And that kind of, it makes perfect sense, 100%. Hey, Pat, I know we're taking a lot of your time. I was going to say, maybe you can tell John also about the chemical-free body, because you mentioned it briefly. But that part of it, I think, is also to help the body, which helps the mind, so to speak.
Yeah. So in my early 20s, John, I spent my entire childhood sick as well from severe black mold damage. My respiratory system was destroyed. And so I always wanted to be, great at sports. I was good at sports in junior high and high school, but I was constantly suffering from just not being able to breathe. And so, wrestling, obviously, here in the state of Iowa, it's the bad wrestlers go out for the basketball team, so to speak, so I never could win a state championship. I'd place at state, things like that, but it was just miserable. And so in my early 20s, I was getting ready to turn professional in kickboxing, and I had been searching and reading and researching. I finally figured out, through some assistance as well from homeopathic doctors and stuff, to find the right combination of antioxidants. And it was literally only 10 days it took me to heal my own respiratory system from a lifetime of just breathing through a straw that was full of phlegm. Was kind of how my childhood and early adulthood was. So I went from sparring with the best boxers in the world, Michael Nunn, and a lot of guys at the boxing gym here in town. Michael Nunn was the best pound-for-pound boxer in the world at the time. And I could start about 3 or 4 rounds with him, and then I just have to stop because I just didn't have the endurance. And so 10 days later, I went 12 rounds with him, and he just goes, "What the hell are you?" And I said, "Just figured out, I guess, what was causing me problems." And over the past 30-some years, I've done nothing but research on how to build superhumans, how to heal sick people through really powerful organic substances, antioxidants, and educating people on the synthetic chemicals and heavy metals that are trapped in their cells and causing their illnesses, literally every form of illness known to man. Besides, it, once our immune systems are that beat up and we're full of those chemicals and heavy metals, now we're vulnerable to a lot of other things, not just the inflammation that's caused by those substances in our body, but also the yeasts, the molds, the bacteria, all these different types of infections, because our immune systems are basically worthless. So that's what I do with a lot of veterans, is I help educate veterans groups, active military groups, even the National Guard people are starting to listen to me and say, wow, we can really mitigate a lot of health issues, and of course a lot of mental issues, because our gut biome, the balance of our gut biome, dictates and gives off chemicals that can cause some thought issues, right? So that's really kind of my mission. Really, has been to and educating farmers, agricultural people, how they're polluting their own land, how that's ending up in our water, how it's destroying people's health, hormonal balance, mental, everything. And just doing my best. And at the same time, I'm dealing with an FDA and a EPA and all these people that have only been educated in terms of heavy metals and synthetic chemicals. They don't even know that heavy metals can be converted to organic metals through plant matter growth and bonding with carbon and assisting in cell health and mitochondrial function and all these things. So it's a bit of an uphill battle. I've had some really interesting conversations with medical doctors, chemists, agronomists, a lot of people that just have never been educated, because I don't know at what year it took place, but they stopped making people take, it was not required to take organic chemistry anymore. And so they don't even know it exists, a lot of these people. And that's where you get these overzealous FDA officials saying, well, there's too many heavy metals, or too much of a certain heavy metal or arsenic in this could be an organic supplement. And they say, no, it contains too many heavy metals. They don't even understand that it's bonded with carbon and it's beneficial to the body, right? So it's an interesting existence I've found myself in with that.
Wow. So I'd like to learn more. So let's exchange some information on that.
Yeah. And so you can go to and research at chemicalfreebody.com.
Which I'll send to you, John. There's a bunch of stuff I have, but
okay, great.
Okay, cool.
I'll send it, but I wanted Pat to explain himself, which is the best way.
Yeah, and I can't make these statements public, obviously, but everybody from, they've got where modern medicine has basically given up on them. And, I work with Tim James at Chemical Free Body. Dr. Treadway is his formulator. Dr. Treadway works with a lot of, like the Hippocrates Health Institute, places where wealthy people go when the doctors have told them they're going to die. And they go to the Hippocrates Health Institute and they walk out 30 days later and they're disease free. That's what and so it's the real way that health is found. Ever since, the old Mr. Rockefeller sent a bunch of donations to Harvard Medical School and Stanford and others and hijacked the medical system and used petroleum-based product synthetics and all that sort of stuff that, so I guess the best way to put it is I tell people you are sick because synthetic chemicals and heavy metals have gathered in your cells and are causing massive amounts of inflammation and toxicity. And then you go to a medical professional and they write you a prescription for more synthetic chemicals. And it's just this vicious cycle that continues to go on and on and on. And it's the exact same thing in agriculture. Because when we poison our soil with synthetics, the plants grow, but they're sick. And then to keep bugs from wanting to eat them, because they don't give off the natural enzymes to defend themselves, they spray them with what have been patented as antibiotics. So then the bugs won't eat it as much, right? So it's the exact same cycle of abuse that goes on in both worlds. And as we poison our soil and our water, then our cells get poisoned, we become poisoned, and then they give us synthetics just like they do in agriculture. It's once you sit back and realize it and recognize it, you go, okay, this has got to stop, right?
Well, there's an intersection in what you're talking about with the work that I've been really passionate about, because you're talking about moving things out of the body physically. right? There some really interesting work around epigenetics, about how our thoughts create the emotions we experience, and the emotions we experience creates the chemical reaction in our body.
Yeah.
And so the combination of both, watching and helping people deal with their thoughts and emotions, internally, the pharmacy that's doing all the hard work, dealing with our environment, the food we eat, our thoughts, I found to be part of the healing journey. Managing my habitual triggers and how my thoughts can get sparked into hypervigilance and anger and different emotions has been a huge part of the equation.
No, and that's the thing is, Tibetan monks bring pregnant, abused women in and we'll do meditation with them and things like that, to help, because they know the fetus is going to be affected by those negative vibrations and thoughts and all of that sort of stuff. It's pretty incredible how they do that. It's big, man. It's really big with thoughts and yeah, it's very real.
You ever heard of the clear body, clear mind from L. Ron Hubbard?
No, I haven't.
I'm not a Scientologist, but I knew it.
Good.
I'm not a Scientologist, but I did get talked into doing a 30-day sweat sauna program where you sit in a wet sauna for 8 hours a day, like 6 hours a day, and you go in there and they feed you cold pressed oils, so it coats your lower intestines, and they fill you full of niacin until your body flushes, and then you go into the sauna and you sit there and you start, all this stuff's coming out of your pores, and it's going in, it's mobilizing stuff at a cellular level, all the fat storages, and it's bringing out all kinds of things from your history. That's the closest thing I can understand to what you're saying about moving toxins out of your body, but you come out the other end of it like a shiny new penny. Like, it's a pretty amazing experience. I never want to do it again, but if I could take a supplement that would help move that stuff out of my body, I would do it all day long.
Much easier, right? I mean, I was going to say that's pretty intense.
Well, and that's the thing is, I that's part of, when I look back on everything, I was in saunas a lot my entire life, from wrestling, right, and from fighting. I spent 30 years cutting weight, so it was, when they talk about fasting and clearing your cells and stuff, I was doing all that stuff for 3 decades, right? From the time I was in 6th grade until I was 42 years old. So, that's part of the stuff that kept me probably sane and focused on a lot of the stuff that I was doing, and so, but the antioxidants, so the antioxidants, they use the antioxidant words, and they use oxidative stress, which is caused by the free radicals in your cells. And free radicals are oxygen atoms that are missing an electron, so to speak. And when heavy metals and these substances are in your cells and they're exposed to these oxygen that are missing, especially missing electrons, is oxidation, rust. Rust starts to take place within your cells. And oxidative stress results in inflammation, which there is no such thing as disease. There is only just different manifestations of inflammation. So I can't have respiratory issues without inflammation. I can't have digestive issues without inflammation. I can't even have brain issues without inflammation, or arthritis, of course, things like that. So Dr. Zach Bush, who was a chemo research scientist, because I'd sitting there for years going, there's no such thing as inflammation. And then I finally heard him in one of his videos say, he was so far down the rabbit hole of modern medicine while researching chemo, different ways to do chemo, as he said, there's literally no difference between a tumor in a cancer patient and an open wound on a diabetic's leg. It's just different manifestations of inflammation. So if we can remove the things out of ourselves that are causing the inflammation, then the symptoms of whatever disease it is they tell you have will start to subside, get much better, and even many times go completely away. That's really what it comes down to. And so there's a lot of really powerful antioxidants out there. But the most powerful one I've ever found is a folic humic acid that a guy discovered searching for years and years and years, testing bogs around North America. And he finally found the most nutrient-rich peat bog on the planet that he could find, and it's the most nutrient-rich one yet found. And due to go down 45 feet until he hit the sediment layer where all the nutrients of 1,500 different types of plants are concentrated, highly concentrated. So there's no chemicals used in the process, nothing. It's flash frozen at high pressure, and it creates the finest, it's the blackest substance on the planet. And you put that in water, and it has the ability to go into the cell, bond with hydrogen, create a massive amount of oxygen, feed your mitochondria the organic carbon bonded metals that your mitochondria needs to burn as fuel to generate energy. And then the last thing it does before it leaves, it bonds with heavy metals and toxins, and your cell recognizes the organic substance as water soluble, and it'll allow it to leave the cell. And then you just detox. And it will rotor-rooter out your intestines. It pushes everything out of the intestines, clears the plaque off the intestinal walls, resets gut biome, and I've never seen anything like it in my 35 years, and I've seen some really amazing stuff. So I have to be really, really careful because the powers that be will, shut it down in a heartbeat.
Well, the question, I think, is always to have information available. People make their own decisions. People make their own choices, much like what John is educating people, much like you're doing, Pat. I mean, you kind of present and say, hey, listen, decide for yourself, whatever. You know what I mean? You're not saying no one is a doctor, no one's anything. You're not saying from that perspective. You're just saying I have info and I want to make people aware, and that's it.
Yeah,
that's so many people's benefit.
I have to word it like this. I have to say, in my personal opinion, in years of research, this offers you the best opportunity, in my mind, my opinion, of hopefully chelating the heavy metals and toxins out of your cells and relieving some of your symptoms. That's all.
Right. Makes sense. I think the two of you should exchange that info, obviously, in each respect, and see how much that could help other people. Why not?
Yeah,
I'll definitely dedicate some time. Understanding it.
Yeah, and like when you were talking about the shadow work earlier, I didn't know anything about that until a woman entered my life who is a very powerful lady. She does mindset coaching, she does motivational speaking, and she helped me a lot with the darkness that I was dealing with, and I learned a lot from her. She went up to the Tip of the Spear program. She did that for a year with Mark Devine, his group, and then she went out and did the 12 and 24-hour trainings and all that. And she's incredible. She kicked the shit out of all the guys. She ran everybody. And her endurance is ridiculous, and physical, mental, spiritual. She's been a blessing for me. She's helped me a great deal. But shadow work has been, it's not easy, man. A lot of people are too afraid of doing it. It can be very painful. It can be very painful stuff.
Okay.
It caught me by surprise because I wasn't expecting it. I went through a program called the Mankind Project.
Okay.
And it's a men's. I do a lot of men's work.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, that's all I do. I don't do mixed work. I understand men, understand myself, and it's really, I would say, it's just so honest and straightforward because men can be vulnerable with each other, and we have mixed genders. There's always this posturing up. Who's the alpha of the alphas? And there's just a lot of facades and ego. And so I used to facilitate a lot of plant medicine men's groups, and just watch years fall away from guys' foreheads, and they become like open. And, what really helped me a lot in the men's work that I've done is, and I did about 19 ayahuasca journeys, and each time I was taken back to the same place. There's all kinds of things going on in and around it, but I was able to tether myself in a place where there wasn't just the absence of conflict and trauma, but there wasn't even the possibility of conflict or trauma. And like we come into the world a clean hard drive, then all this shit happens to us. And being able to go back, it's like a form of soul retrieval work. And having done a lot of shadow work, I was able to see through like this cloud, this veil that had been always kind of haunting me and keeping me at bay. That survival mindset in the back of my mind that took over when I was a little kid and never wanted to give up control. So I find that the shadow work caught me by surprise, and then working with men for so many years, being able to see them like put down the ego, just transcend the ego, and really kind of get in touch with who they are as a human being, without all the trauma. I mean, some really, really tough guys that are able to like come home and be with their families, really, like really be present. That's a gift. I never had that. And I was so self-absorbed most of my life that I wasn't healthy to be in a relationship with. I don't think I just wasn't aware, just too self-absorbed. And I had this chronic dissatisfaction. Like you never celebrate things, you just keep moving. Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's funny you say that, because I've got one of the guys that I trained who's a world UFC champ, Jens Pulver. So
he's a wild man.
What's that?
He's a wild man.
Oh yeah. So he had a horrible childhood. His father was horrible, really bad. Stuck shotguns in their mouths, and all kinds of shit. So he was a handful to coach, I can tell you that. But he won his world title, and I asked him, I said, when you got home, what'd you do with your, because I knew what I did with my world title belt, but just what you're addressing, what you're saying. And he said, no, I just threw it under my bed. And I said, yeah, mine are in my basement in a box.
Wow.
Yeah. So I said, it's weird. It's like you don't want to enjoy the, again, you just like, it's weird. It's weird.
I think sometimes people don't know how to think about it, right? You get so deep and you so, like you just said, as John said, didn't have that satisfaction, didn't have that feeling of self-containment. And that's what happens in that case, like you said, with Jens. There's not even that side of him where he could go and appreciate himself, so to speak.
Right.
It's so amazing.
You start looking for the next mountain right away,
But when he fights, I mean, he's just got this maniacal, like this energy, man. And it's like, where's that come from? You just explained it, adverse childhood, right? He's coming from a place of, deep, probably pain,
Yeah.
Probably feels good.
He married a girl from Thailand, and her Eastern philosophy and mentality and calmness has helped him immensely.
Yeah, good for him.
Amazing.
He's found a lot of peace of late, so it's good.
He was inducted recently, right? He was in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, this summer they'll do the ceremony.
Oh, right. Okay. Amazing. Well, guys, I think I so totally appreciate both of you, and I think we want to exchange, like I said, exchange info and try to help each other.
Yeah, and so
the
link you sent me, John, is that also for is that for the entire audiobook?
Yeah, if you go to the transitioningveteransbook.com, up in the right-hand corner on the menu, it says audiobook preview. And the whole audiobook is there to listen to. There's also a document. It's an individual and group study guide you can click on. And then there's a transition map and action plan you can click on.
Okay.
And all of that is just there for anybody who it might help.
Okay, and I'm going to your text message. So I can send you the link to organic supersoldier.com and then chemical free body.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'm really, really, really fascinated about this real dark, rich, dense, nutrient rich product that you're talking about.
I mean, it's the formulators that I've sent out, the guys that are really well respected formulators have gone out to look for anything fulvicumic, shilajit, anything that would remotely be in the same category, and they just can't find anything anywhere close to the nutrient levels and stuff. And most of those are inorganic because they're fossilized. So this is still alive when it comes out of the ground at 60,000 years old. So it has the microbes with it, which are, deeply needed, not only to heal soil, because you can put this into soil and it starts to convert the soil to 60,000-year-old nutrient-rich, microbial-rich soil. And then you can do the same thing with plants. You can do the same thing with animals and humans in its different forms. So, yeah, and I think it's the most valuable substance on the planet. Literally, the most valuable substance on the planet, because it can heal soil, plants, animals, and humans.
Well, let's see what we can do to be of support to each other. You can also go to harvestingwisdom.com,
which I'll send over. In the social media. Yeah,
harvestingwisdom.com. Pat, that's to my book that's coming out next week, and I think you'll relate to it. Having talked to you now a little bit, we share some unfortunate history, and maybe some similar experiences, but I'd like to keep in touch with you and see what I can do to help support you.
Yeah, likewise, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mike.
Absolutely. I'm so happy you guys talked, and definitely will keep it up.
Thanks, Mike.
Have a great day, guys.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you.